Welcome to Anneliese's Mixed Media Series for Beginners. Come on in, sit down, relax, and enjoy this series. And thanks for watching. Hi everyone, it's Ann back for our art journaling journey, Anneliese's Mixed Media Art Journaling Series for Beginners. And remember last week we did this spread. Alright, so this week we're doing another spread. And this week I want to show you some of my collage techniques that I love to do and make it funky and make it fun and that kind of thing. You know, what we did here was kind of like collage work, kind of a mixed media collage work, because we did take pieces from magazines and we took some postage stamps, that kind of thing. But this time we're going to do a lot more collage type stuff, so make sure that you get out your matte medium or whatever you want to use. You could even use a glue stick to glue these down. The only problem with glue sticks is that a lot of times it won't adhere the pieces of paper really well. So, you know, matte medium works a lot better. Anyhow, so make sure you have some water and a brush and a piece of paper towel, because you're going to need that. And I am using, for my background, I'm using some of this tissue paper that has writing on it. Somebody had sent me this in some Happy Mail a long time ago, and I've used bits and pieces of it because if you followed me before on my YouTube channel, you'll know that I love Paris. I love all things Paris, and my second language that I speak is French. And so there's a lot of cool French sayings on this. So I'm going to use some pieces of this. And another tip I have, and trick, is I like to get vintage materials. And what I will do is I will scan that material, you know, the fabric, onto my computer, and then I'll manipulate it with a photo app. It could be Photoshop or any kind of photo application that you might have on your computer or software or whatever. And so I got this really pretty print fabric, excuse me, and then sometimes I'll actually stamp on it. And I just got these stamps from Robin Marie Smith. She had some stamps and some other stuff from her art journaling classes, etc. And she is now, excuse me, going out of business for that. I'm sorry, I've got a tickle in my throat. We still, I live in Nevada now, but I live in Reno, and I live right, which is kind of along the border between Nevada and California. And there's a bunch of fires going on in California as well as here in Nevada, and so we're getting all the smoke from everything. And it's really affected my asthma and just everything. So I apologize ahead of time if I'm coughing and sneezing and sniffling and that kind of thing. Anyhow, so this is a tip. You know, you can get a piece of fabric and scan it and that kind of thing, and you can stamp images onto it to give it some, you know, interesting look, and you can tear this apart and use it in your backgrounds. So this is something I love to do. And then I do love to get old music texts, and this, I don't even know where I got this from. I think I might have gotten this at an antique shop, and it just is a page out of some piano music or something. So I'm going to be using some of this, and sometimes I do scan this onto my computer and then print it out, reprint it out, so that I can use the piece of music multiple times. But at this point I have so much music right now that I'm just going to use the original piece. Now if you've seen the word searches, you know, in your grocery store, or an area where you might buy books or whatever. I like picking these up and using these for backgrounds as well. So I usually just kind of pick out a page, tear it out, and then save the rest for another time. So I'm going to start with my background, and I'm going to speed through this part because it can get kind of boring to watch me glue pieces of paper to my background. And then I'll be back to go on to the next step. So I hope that you join me in this, and don't forget to check out my Facebook group, Anneliese's Mixed Media Everything, where I will have those materials on there listed in the file area of my group, so that you can find what I used exactly, what materials I used, in case you want to go out and purchase those items. And so without further ado, I'm going to get started. And also, the Facebook group is a great place to post questions. If you have any questions that you want to know about, or if I forgot a material that I didn't list in my materials in the files, that's a great place to ask questions and that kind of thing. And also to share your work. Share what you have come up with, what these lessons have inspired you to do. All right? So we're doing a double page spread again, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of balance these out a little. Alright, and then I like kind of like cutting out pieces from magazines that add some interest to my background. This was it's actually eyeshadows, and I kind of like the look of this. The texture kind of shows through on the photograph, so it's kind of cool. So I'm going to use that. And the pages are starting to buckle a little, and I don't mind that because this is a, kind of like a practice journal too. This is your first journal, and you don't have to have fancy paper, to create a mixed media art journal. I like using composition books. I think it's more freeing than using expensive art journals. So then I did the same thing. This was a piece of material that I had that I scanned onto my computer, some vintage material, and I'm going to go ahead and put this down as well. right, then remember to get your heat gun and go ahead and dry this down, or your hair dryer, and if you don't have either one, let it sit out and dry completely before you start adding more layers and things to your page. So I'll be back in a few. All right, so I'm going to take some gesso like I did before, techniques, but this time what I am going to do, and you'll see in a second, if I can get the gesso to come out. Sometimes the lids get clogged. I didn't wipe it down before I close the bottle, and so this is what happens. This time I'm using my paintbrush. And you noticed how I'm covering it all up, and you're kind of going, ah, don't do that. You'll see in a minute what I'm going to do here. Okay. So it's pretty much covered really well, and then I'm going to take a baby wipe, and I'm going to wipe off the excess. And you don't have to use gesso. You could use white acrylic paint or a different color paint if you wanted to, but I'm using white gesso. Kind of pushes everything kind of to the back and creates a kind of a cool effect also. You got to kind of work fast when you're doing this so that it doesn't completely dry while you're wiping it off. Okay. All right, and before I decide to add any more marks or anything else on my page, I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step. So what I like to do is I like to cut out images out of magazines. And I liked this girl, okay, but you'll see what I'm going to do. I like to alter these images. So what I do is our cover, okay, so whatever cover you decided to do with the person, you're going to take it and scan it onto your computer or take a picture of it and then, you know, download it onto your computer or whatever, however you do it. Then print it out, but reduce it down. Okay, make it smaller. If you don't have a computer or a printer, you could actually, if you have a flash drive, take that image to a print company, or you could actually take your whole journal, your whole cover, and get it photocopied and then have it reduced down from there. So like Staples or Office Depot has those services, and they can actually do the reduction for you, reducing for you, so you don't waste a whole lot of money trying to figure out how to do it. So I'm taking my girl's face and I'm going to glue it onto her first, like this. So I usually, for that, I do use a glue stick for the initial gluing. So this is how it's going to be, like this. Okay, and then I'm going to put her face down on here, and I'm going to glue this hand on. Like that. Okay. And I'm going to find a place to glue her down on, and so what I'm going to do now is I will use some matte medium. I like to put some on the back of her as well to make absolutely sure that she gets adhered down well enough here. So I spread around the gesso using a brush. I mean, not gesso, the matte medium with a brush. Okay. And then I take a gift card or a credit card. Oops, that one was a little bit low. That's okay. I should have put her up a little higher so her whole foot will stay on there, but that's okay. All right, then you'll let this dry or use your heat gun or hair dryer to dry this. Okay, so it's still kind of tacky to the touch, but that's okay. It'll dry more as the time goes and some of this milkiness will go away. So next, what I like to do is I like to get, I have all these bits and pieces of flowers and things that I've cut out of magazines, as well as Pixabay. I love to get images off of pixabay.com. I also will do some doodle flowers of my own, and then when I'm done, I will scan them onto my computer and print them out. So I've got all kinds of flowers and butterflies, things like that. And I'll use these in my piece. I also will create borders using background pieces that I've created, and then I'll create borders for it. I'll also cut out images out of the magazines, like I've said. I'll also create some shapes out of pieces of papers that I've used for backgrounds. And so I'll put these in different areas as well on my page. Some people have sent me happy mail, like circles and things, and so sometimes I'll use those. Some more book text. Sometimes I'll add extra book text. Also, like this crown I got off of Pixabay. So I like to alter more with using pieces like that, as well as I got these sunglasses out of a magazine and I altered them a bit, and then I scanned them onto my computer and I reduced the size, and it's still kind of big, and I don't mind it like that because I like it being funky and fun and that kind of thing. So this is what I'm going to glue down on her face. Probably should have put the hand. Let's see if it's still wet enough where I can lift it up. No, I can't. Okay, that's okay. And then I'm going to put the crown on her head. And you also can create, borders with print. So like if you've got, I got this from a calendar, and I just drew out my border and created a border for that. And I created some stars on another background, and I went ahead and scanned those and cut those out. So there's all kinds of ways of creating a piece, the way you want to do it. Okay, just kind of think outside the box of how you want your piece to turn out. All right, and I got this watch out of a magazine. So I like kind of like playing around, figuring out where I want my pieces to go. Then I go ahead and I glue them down, and then if I feel like my background's too busy or whatever, I might add some more color to the background or mark making kind of stuff to the background. So it's all has to do with personal preference of how you want things to be glued down on your page. Okay. Just play. Don't let things get, you know, bother you. You know, just play. Don't worry about how things might be going down. Just figure out where you want things to go and then glue them down. Over here, actually. So my suggestion is, if you want some background pieces, go ahead and create yourself some background papers to use for collage as well as for, you know, collage type stuff. Like I got these succulents, I think out of a magazine or a catalog or something like that. So look through your catalogs that you might get in the mail and your magazines and newspapers and that kind of thing, and see what you could cut out to use for collage. And I made this kind of a squiggly kind of symbol kind of thing. So I'm going to add that onto it. And you could actually draw directly onto your page and create something like that. And I'll show you how to do that. I often don't like to advertise who created the watch or, you know, the logos kind of thing because of copyright issues. So I'll often cover up using some kind of piece of collage or, you know, things that I've done in previous work. I'll scan and print out like this flower. So think of things that you can draw out and copy onto your computer, or you can just use directly onto your page. You know, like if you've drawn something out onto a piece of paper, use that in your collage work. If you don't have a printer, you know, that kind of thing. Like this was a flower from another project I did, and I scanned it and printed it out and cut it out, so I can use for other projects. And this is a flower I created. So basically what I did was I drew out the flower, then I took some book text and cut out a circle and glued it in there, and then I outlined it with Stabilo All pencil, and then I printed it out onto my computer, so that I could use in other projects. So these are great ways of reusing your artwork in different ways without having to go out and buy more papers or buy fancy papers. Draw out, doodle Doodle some flowers. And Etsy is a great, not Etsy, Pinterest is a great place to go for doodling ideas. Just, you know, put in the search engine, in the search window, doodles, and there's all kinds of doodle things that come up for ideas, for inspiration on how to create your own doodles. Gonna go here. Yeah, it looks funky, huh? All right, so I'm gonna leave it like this. I'm gonna come back in and do some marks in the background. And then I am going to take these. Okay, so what I like doing also is cutting out lettering out of magazines and then creating a saying, all right? And this is kind of big, but I don't really mind it being too big. I could actually trim this down. What I did was I cut out some words and I took some graph paper and I went ahead and glued my words down to some graph paper. You don't have to do that. You could just glue your phrase directly onto your paper. Okay, and I also like to kind of sometimes cut out the areas in the background here. Make it, instead of positive space, make it negative space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside while this is drying on its own. I'm going to show you how I cut these out. So before I glue my saying down, I'm going to do some background here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my mark making tools out. And this is where it's your own personal preference as to what you want to put in your background, or if you even want to put marks in your background, you could just leave it as is. You could also add color to your background, which I think I might add some color first and then add some mark making. So get your portfolio oil pastels out and I'll show you how to work with those. So I'm going to use a light blue, or true blue it's called, and pink. I'm going to go ahead and just color in some color, okay, in my background, and then you'll see me in a minute. I'm going to wet it down. I'm going to activate it with some water because these are water soluble. Or you could just leave it as is because it kind of adds some cool texture if you wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and just wet it down. And because this is water soluble, my recommendation is to go ahead and spray it with a fixative after all of this is done so that it stays permanent. Okay, so I've wetted it down and I'm going to go ahead and dry it. All right, so I'm going to be using some black acrylic paint to make some marks with. So get out your fancy paper plate palette. Okay, and remember to squeeze a little bit of your paint out. And I'm using some corrugated cardboard. So basically what that is when you get cardboard, it's already covered with a smooth piece, like the back here. What you do is you kind of take off that first layer to get to the corrugated part. All right, and then I'm also using a piece of silicone mat. This is like a hot mitt that you might buy at, let's say, the dollar store, or you can find them at some home improvement stores as well. It has a really cool, texture and mark. This makes a great mark making tool, and you can cut them up into small bits like this, and then when they get too full of paint, you can either soak them in Murphy's oil soap. Murphy's oil soap is my best friend for cleaning brushes and mark making tools, that kind of thing, and stencils. So if you don't want to waste it or throw it out, you can soak it in that and the paint will eventually come off. You might have to soak it for a couple days and then use a scrub brush to get the rest off, but it works really well. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and start making some marks, and I'm going to use some black paint. And remember, you need to kind of dab off some of the excess before you go ahead and mark onto your piece. And you could use different colored paint if you wanted to. I'm using black today to make my marks with, but you could come in and use, any color that you like. It doesn't have to be black. Sometimes not all the pieces, corners and things will adhere, so sometimes you might have to go back and re-glue down some pieces that might have not gotten enough glue underneath them. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and glue down my saying. And sometimes I'll come back in and remark some areas where I think it kind of faded into the paper a little too much. So I'll come back in and add some more color. All right, so I'm gonna let this dry, and then I'll be back in a little while and I'll show you what the next and probably final step will be. All right, so I hope that you stick around and I'll be back in a few. All right, so I've cut out pieces of butterfly wings and things, and I kind of like to sometimes add more funky stuff to my collage pieces. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, so I got these really cool butterfly stickers at the dollar store. So I'm gonna put maybe one somewhere on my page because I do like butterflies. Then make sure that everything is dry before you come back in and do other things. All right, and so before I outline things, I'm taking a Posca paint pen. I think Sharpie also makes paint pens. Liquitex makes paint pens. Liquitex pens are a lot more expensive than Posca pens, paint pens. So yeah, so I'm just trying to keep you guys, you know, on a budget. So I like adding, you know, sometimes squiggly things, shapes. All right, now I'm taking a Sharpie and I'm going to go around and outline everything that I think needs re-outlining or outlining in general. And I just like to sometimes add extra little bits and things to some of the collage pieces, whether it's dots or shapes or something to add to the collaged pieces, glued pieces. Now I'm just taking a gold Sharpie and just kind of adding some other little bits of things here. Oh, this Sharpie's actually dried out. I'm going to use a bronze metallic Sharpie. All right, so that's it. So think about how you're going to make your backgrounds. Cut out some things out of magazines for your background page, scrapbooking papers, collage type papers, music notes, music sheets, that kind of thing. Think about going on Pinterest and looking around at doodles. Get inspired by the different doodles you might see and create some doodles of your own. Now, generally when I do make my doodle flowers and things like that, I usually get Canson brand watercolor paper that I find at Walmart. It's about $5.97 for a nice pad of it, where versus going to an art store where you're paying almost $15 for the same exact pad of watercolor paper. And then what I do is I use that watercolor paper, I'll draw my doodles out, and then I might use some kind of water-soluble felt pens. Now Crayola makes some what they call washable markers, and if you activate them with water, they can turn into watercolors. instead of buying an expensive brand of watercolor pens, and if you're not quite sure if you like them, try the Crayola washable markers first. And right now is the perfect time to go out and buy these school supplies, because I've noticed a lot of the stores already have their school supplies out. So try the Crayola crayons, markers, pens, whatever for your art journaling. And then eventually, when you feel confident enough to, work in your journal and all of that, then start thinking about some of the items that you might like to have. Save your money or use a coupon for like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or support maybe one of your local mom and pop art stores. Things generally tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they do tend to have sales and things, and sometimes they do have their own coupons as well. So just ask. Doesn't hurt to ask, right? And think about that, and then do your first layer, then add some gesso or paint or something and wipe it away so that you still see the background, but it's not making it so busy where everything, the background pops out more than your actual items, collage pieces on the page would be. And before I end this, I'm going to use some stickles. Also puffy paints. Puffy paint has some puff paints that are glitter. These are also glitter, and you can get just less expensive glitter glue at the dollar store. Generally it only comes in silver or gold, but sometimes I'll find other colors. And today I'm just happen to be using stickles, but for beginners, I think you should just stick with what you have, or look around your house and see what you have. And if you don't have some of these items, go and check out the dollar store, because a lot of times you can find things for $1. And I like finding deals. And I just happen to have these, so I'm going to use what's left of these up, because sometimes they start to go bad. So think about that. And I'm going to let this dry. And I hope that you enjoyed our second spread in our art journal pages. And next week, just keep your eyes open, peeled for the next lesson. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and that you'll go out and create a beautiful collage, mixed media collage piece. And don't forget to share in my Facebook group, Anneliese's Mixed Media Everything. And head on over there. I will post a link down in this description box below. And again, thanks again for watching and for joining me. And don't forget to make, if you like what you see, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And I shall see you next time. Toodles, bye. Have a wonderful day.